Hello, my name's Adam Ramsey, and I'm mostly here to try and plug a book, not really. But my publisher tells me I need to do that every time I talk about things. So you should get my book. It's called 42 Reasons to Support Scottish Independence. But one of them is about money, and that's what I am going to talk about. I was asked to come and speak about this, and then they said, oh, it's organised by Positive Money, and I have a confession, which is that I disagree with about 50% at least of what Positive Money say. I don't think they are trying to democratise the money supply. I think they want to put it under the control of bureaucrats. But that's a whole another debate, and I'm not going to have it now because it's their event and that would be mean. But what I am going to talk about is the context here in Scotland for this discussion, because what I think Positive Money do, and where I agree with them, is they have a very good critique of what's wrong with the money supply, and what independence I think allows is a proper debate about what sort of monetary system we want to have in a modern country. And while, if we have a yes vote, I'll be arguing against them, I think it's a very good thing we get to have that debate in the first place. But I wanted to start by saying I think it's quite a good thing, but I also think it's important not to over-egg the importance of money at all. Alistair Darling said in the debate the other day, he said, money is the basis of the economy. Now, can anyone guess what I might say to that? Why I think that's total bollocks. What is the basis of the economy? People. It's people, and it's work, and it's natural resources. If you think that money is the basis of the economy, then you're going to misunderstand all of the rest of economics, and maybe that explains a little bit about Alistair Darling's term as Chancellor of the Exchequer. So the first thing to say is that money isn't the basis of the economy. People and work and natural resources are the basis of the economy, and money is just little tokens we use. They're kind of useful things and bits of numbers on screens to help us do that. And it is useful, and it's important to understand how it works, but don't let anyone ever tell you that money is the basis of the economy. There is, in fact, a word for people who think that. There's an ideological school which does believe that. That word is monetarists. And we kicked them out quite rightly in the 80s. Even Thatcher decided that was too crazy a right-wing ideology and had to get rid of it. So let's not be under that illusion. And the reason I say that is that in the Scottish independence debate, as in most of the world at the moment, people who are in positions of power will talk very confidently about economics to try and scare you into doing what they want. And they'll often be talking total bollocks. And when Alistair Darling says, you can't possibly be independent because you don't know what the currency is going to be, and currency is the basis of the economy. That's exactly what he's doing. And frankly, it doesn't matter that much what currency we have. It matters a bit, and it's useful to talk about it. But let's not get caught up in that illusion that money is what is at the basis of our economy. I mean, Jesus. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say, again, is slightly odd, because I'm going to defend a set of things I don't believe in, which I think I'm going to be doing a lot of tonight. But I also think it's important to understand that the SNP's ideas about currency aren't that bad. They're not what I would do. I'm in favour of an independent currency, but before I say that, I don't want to get into this discussion which undermines, the idea that you might want to vote yes because the SNP policies are bad. I think the SNP policies are about as bad as the current situation, and so what they're going to make it harder for us to get even better, but they certainly don't make anything worse. And so I just want to go through why I think that is very quickly before I get on to some of the opportunities I think we will have with independence. What the SNP is saying is their ideal option is a currency union. So that would mean that we would have some kind of say in interest rates, pretty much, with the pound. So we keep the pound, and we have some kind of say, some kind of treaty with England where we agree things with them. And that means, that we get basically the current situation as it is now, with one minor improvement, which is that we would then get a say in interest rates. And this is really important to remember, because they keep saying, that if the SNP get their plan B, which is that we have the pound without a currency union, if we get a plan B, then they say, you'll have no say in interest rates. In 1997, Gordon Brown handed that power. It used to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer set interest rates. He handed that power to the Independent Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England, which is run entirely by bankers in the interests of the square mile in London. So we have no say at the moment in interest rates. So the first thing to understand is that what the SNP are proposing, Plan A, is an improvement on where we are now, because we would then get a say of some sort in interest rates, which is not what we have at the moment. Their Plan B, in terms of interest rates, is certainly no worse than the situation we have now. And there is, and this I guess a bit geeky, but you turned up to a meeting about money, and so I'm going to go there. So sorry, but there is one other detail I think it's important to understand, which is people then say, but then you wouldn't have a lender of last resort. So you have no central bank. It means that you can't suddenly bail out all your banks, and that is sort of true to an extent, and that's one of the reasons I am in favour of an independent currency eventually, at some point down the line. But I also think that it's important to remember that, as Salmond has said, and he is quite right about this, if Scotland doesn't get any share of the assets, it doesn't get any share of the liabilities, it doesn't need to take on any debt, it means we'd suddenly be many, many billions of pounds richer. And if we really did want to bail out the banks, which I think we should probably have a debate about if the time comes, but if we did, that's the money that we could use to do it. The money that's currently our debt, we could go back into that amount of debt to pay off the banks if you want to. So not having a central bank doesn't necessarily mean you can't bail out banks if you're incredibly rich. And it's worth remembering, if we were founded as a new country without any debt, we would be incredibly rich. So that's important not to believe what people say. So that's all a very long way of saying that a few ideas I don't agree with aren't that bad. I don't think the SNP are right to propose a currency union, but all they're proposing is basically we keep things as they are, and it's not nearly as terrible as Better Together like to tell us. But then the most important thing, and the thing which is exciting, is the opportunity which independence gives us, that at some point down the line, we have real chances to think about and think radically about the kind of currency we might want to have in an independent Scotland and how we want to control that currency. So for example, I think it's important to look at initially the very simple option of an independent currency. The richest countries in the world are almost all small European countries with their own independent currency, and there's an important reason for that, which is that different economies have slightly different natures, and so what we've seen with the pound in recent years, over the last 30 or 40 years, is a thing that economists call Dutch disease. So in the 60s, the Netherlands found oil. And the result of finding oil was they got 10 years of recession, which economists were kind of baffled by, but they realised what had happened is that the oil because everyone wanted to buy oil in Dutch currency, the cost of Dutch currency, the guilder, went right up through the roof. And so it became very expensive to buy anything else from the Netherlands. And so all their factories collapsed, and the country went into recession, had mass unemployment. So finding oil was a very, very bad thing for them. Now that's a story you hear quite often, and the point of that is that at the moment, what you don't hear is that that's basically the situation we're in Britain right now, where the City of London trades most of the world's derivatives, which is some of the highest value things you can trade. And that forces the value of the pound right up, forces the price of the pound right up, which makes it very, very expensive for people to buy our stuff. So again, Better Together keeps saying that there's this line they use that 72% of Scottish exports are to the rest of the UK. Now, my question is always, why? Why can we only export anything to the rest of the UK? Normal countries our size aren't so dependent on one export market. That's really, really dangerous. That's a real problem for us, because the UK economy, frankly, is terrifying and about to collapse. So the last thing we want to be doing is relying on the UK economy for our exports. And the answer to that question is that we're in the pound. And the pound's really expensive, because all of the world's derivatives are traded in it. So no one else can afford to buy the stuff that we make. So the chance to escape that and have our own currency is, I think, one we shouldn't shirk. And I think, we don't need to do these things all at once, and maybe it makes sense to have a transitionary period of the pound for 5 or 10 years. But I think the chance to begin to get to an independent currency is an important one. And again, this is a bit geeky, but there's another detail here which is important, which is that you get this response when you say that, which is Scotland's going to be richer than the rest of the UK. Scotland's GDP per capita is higher by about £4,000 a person than the UK's is. So if the market worked, then the Scottish currency, a Scottish independent currency, would be more expensive than the pound. So that would be the last thing you want for Scottish exports, being attached to the poorer rest of the UK. Would be quite good for Scotland as a richer part. We're having our poorer neighbours to the south dragging down the value of our currency, very good for us. But the point here is that, and I'm sorry for the wonkiness, but the point here is that it's not, the market doesn't work. The reason the pound is expensive is not just, as I said before, that the derivatives are traded and that pushes up the price of the pound. It's also that the banks like the pound being expensive, because if you're people who basically make pounds, and obviously if they're expensive, that's very good for you. And the banks exert huge political pressure, both on the government and more importantly on the Bank of England, to keep the pound very expensive. So if Scotland got out of that, got out of the pound, then we'd have the opportunity to use political levers to reduce the value of the Scottish mark, the Scottish currency. And a good example of this is that in Norway, we talk a lot about the Norwegian Oil Fund, but the Norwegian Oil Fund is important for two reasons, not just because it saves for the future, though that's important, but also, and you hear a lot less about this, but because it's not allowed to invest in the Norwegian economy. So Norway owns 1% of the global economy, but it's not allowed to invest a single penny from its oil fund in the Norwegian economy, and the reason for that is it doesn't then have to buy up Norwegian kroner, so the value of the Norwegian kroner, it's not as expensive. They're not buying up with all their oil money Norwegian kroner, so it's affordable to buy Norwegian products abroad. Norway is so rich that if they did boost the pound, boost the value of the kroner with their currency, then no one could afford ever to buy anything from Norway and the rest of their economy would collapse. So the point is, Norway found a way around Dutch disease. They didn't make the mistake that the Dutch made. And with an independent currency, that's something that Scotland could do too, and I think should think very seriously about doing. Not as an aside because of an oil fund, because we obviously shouldn't be burning filthy stuff, but certainly as a renewable energy fund, we're going to be rolling in cash if we exploit our renewable energy resources, and anything like the potential we could. And what we do with that money and how we stop it from outpricing our other industries is going to be an important question, and having our own currency would give us a good tool to do that. What time is it? How long have I got? So then, so that's the kind of conservative option. People think that the idea that setting up our own currency is crazy, but Iceland, which has the same population as Aberdeen, has its own currency. Scotland is about the median country, and it's slightly above the median country in terms of population in the world, and most of the countries who are smaller than us have their own currency. So that's just like the boring thing to do. Setting up our own currency is just like, to me, it sort of seems obvious that if you're going to be a country, it's useful to have your own currency. It's not necessary. France says, fine. Going into the euro, if you're a rich country like Germany, is very, very good for you. It's terrible for the Greeks, but being attached to Greece, which brings down the value of your currency, would be, could potentially be great for us. But so you don't need one, but I think it makes sense. But then I think there's some really exciting options for what you could do, when we're totally rethinking our currency. And this is where positive money begins to come in, not because I agree with their proposals, because as I said before, I don't think they are suggesting the democratisation of the money system. They say that the money supply should be controlled by a set of bureaucrats unaccountable to democracy. I think that's a terrible idea, but I do think that we should think, for example, about democratising the banks in our country as a whole. I think that one of the main problems with the economy of the UK is we have the most centralised banking system in the Western world. We're so terrible on the centralisation of our banking system that we could even look to America to have a fairer banking system, which isn't the thing you often say about anything in economics. But it's quite normal across the world to have lots and lots of local banks who do the lending. And as positive money rightly say, it's that lending which in practice creates most of the money that's in circulation. When people lend money, they effectively create new money, as the whole film you're about to watch explains. And so for me, the opportunity to introduce regulations, which means that that's being done at a local level by local and ideally democratically accountable banks, is a huge one, because what that does is gives the opportunity to inject much needed money into the poorest communities in our society. And I think to think about this, you don't need to go back that far in history. So people heard of the TSB? So the TSB was the result of a merger in the 70s, I think, of a series of local savings banks. In fact, there's one left, the Airdrie Savings Bank is the only one that remains, and you can still get a bank account with the Airdrie Savings Bank. There used to be this network all across Scotland. In every little town, you had a savings bank. And the manager of that bank would be the person who would choose whether or not you got a loan if you had a nice idea. I might go to you and say, look, I bloody love zip wires, and I want to set up a zip wire, and if I charge everyone 30p a pop, I can make my money back. I need to buy the rope in the first place. And he'd say, that's a great idea. And so I could go and do that. But now the decisions are centralised. But if you have that decision back locally, and I think you make it democratically accountable, then that provides a huge opportunity, which at the moment isn't allowed within, very hard at least, within the regulatory systems of the UK government's banking system, because it's set up and designed by the lobbyists of the massive banks in London, who fund most of the politicians at Westminster. So the point is, there's huge opportunities even there to reform the banking system. The banking system is the money system. They're very hard to extract. And then you can go even more crazy. Has anyone heard of Totnes, the Totnes pound? So I was down in Totnes a few weeks ago, And in Totnes, you can go and you can get a currency which is the same value as a pound, but you can only spend it in shops in Totnes, and so it keeps money circulating in Totnes, and that stops, that helps localise economies, which of course environmentally is going to be particularly important. And so I think it's going to be useful to think in the coming years about whether what we want is a single Scottish currency, or whether maybe what we should be doing is having a Scottish currency, but then also a whole series of local currencies, and only using the Scottish currency for trade between cities when we need to. And I think if we're going to think about bringing power closer to people, which ultimately I think is what this referendum is about, or ought to be about, then bringing the power to create money, to create, to expand the money supply when you need to, back close to communities, I think is hugely exciting, and gives the opportunity to invest a lot in people's great ideas, but in democratic ways, and it gives the power to a community to choose to invest in my awesome zipwire idea. But to do that democratically, so that if my zipwire is going to go over your garden and ruin your pretty flowers, you can complain about it. So I think the point is that these are all discussions we need to have down the line. If we vote yes later this month, then we get the chance to build a whole new country and a whole new system, and it's going to be important that we don't just assume that we do the same things as people have done in the past, because frankly they're not working that well. And we have a whole opportunity to build new things, to have new ideas and to think big. The ideas that Positive Money have, as I say, I don't agree with, but I think they open up that debate, and so that's very constructive. And I hope that lots of other people are going to have ideas that are better than any of us have had now, and we can have those instead. And with that, as my publisher says, buy my ebook. It's called 42 Reasons to Support Scottish Independence. And what time are we at? Well, thank you very much. I'm aware everyone's debating currency at the moment, and I kind of feel like it's a thing that people talk about all the time, but we're not normally expected to know anything about it. So, has anyone got anything that someone said? Yeah.
I don't know if I'll finish show, but after the Occupy, there were talks about finance and everything like that. And it seems like there are dark powers that make sure that these beautiful dreams don't ever happen. How do we prevent that?
Organise. Democracy, the power of the people will always try and stop us from doing awesome things.
Apparently the human race tends to find very, very good reasons to be corrupt compared to how to make bad news. But again, it is a community thing.
Yeah, I think democracy is the only way you battle corruption. No, cool, okay, I'll have enough then. But thank you very much. Oh, sorry, there's some more there.
You're criticising the central bank in Europe and America. Surely the central bank in the UK is the best. I mean, the European central bank just drops its rate to try and protect itself against more recession in the European countries. Well, I understand what you're saying democracy, but I'm not quite clear about what you're saying in the central bank in the UK currently being poor.
Well, I think the point is that almost all central banks in the world now, and this didn't used to be the case, are groups of bureaucrats appointed by politicians but accountable to no one. And I think that's fundamentally anti-democratic. That's my complaint. And I think a lot of economists would agree with that. They should be acting in the interests of the people, not in the interests of whichever elites end up lobbying them, and they're not accountable to us.
So you don't think the bank now is acting independently of government?
I think there's no such thing as independence. I think that independence means acting in the interests of the powers that have taught you your economics, that have sent you to school in the first place, and so on. It's not conscious, but I think that very clearly the run up to the financial collapse, the Bank of England significantly failed.
That problem is not money, but usually the whole concept of charging. Why can't we just use tokens? Why when you give someone money or lend someone money, why do you have to demand that down the line you have to pay double back?
I think you should ask that question to these guys who are going to be on at the end, because they can give you much more detailed answers, and I'm aware that I probably don't have the time. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thanks very much.